The restaurant was dimly lit, all soft gold reflections and low jazz, the kind that made conversations feel important even when they weren't. I could still smell the cedarwood candles drifting between the tables, mixing with the faint sweetness of champagne. My silk sleeve brushed the edge of the tablecloth as I reached for my glass, slow and controlled, the way you do when you already know the ending to a story the other person hasn't even begun to understand. Across from me, he leaned back like a man who believed confidence was the same thing as competence. Marcus, charming to the untrained eye. Sharp jawline, tailored navy blazer, a watch he'd definitely financed rather than earned. The type of man women trip over themselves for. The type that never learned what actual power looked like. So, he said, swirling his wine like it held stock predictions. I've been thinking about us long term. There it was. The pitch. He loved pitches. I tilted my head, the pearl earring grazing my neck. Long term. He grinned. Not warmly. Curiously. Like he was studying a subject he'd already decided the answers to. Yeah. But to be honest, dating someone like you comes with risks. My heart didn't skip. Not even a twitch. I'd heard men like him all my life. Men who confuse their ambition with entitlement. Men who think they're climbing when they're only standing on borrowed ladders. Risks. I repeated. He nodded casually, taking another sip. Let's not pretend. You're comfortable. Too comfortable. Men talk. They say women like you look for security. He laughed softly. Gold digger vibes, you know? Gold digger. The word clinked against the crystal glass like a fork striking porcelain. Sharp. Loud. Wrong. I felt the insult land, not because it hurt, but because of how boldly he delivered it, like he believed he was offering clarity instead of condescension. But my face didn't change. Not an inch. Silence is a currency, and I've learned it buys more than anger ever could. Under the chandelier's glow, I let the diamonds at my collarbone catch the light, just briefly, then I lowered my gaze and smiled. Not defensive. Not offended. Just a practiced, elegant acknowledgement of a man who had no idea he was walking into his own consequence. What makes you think I'm after your money? I asked softly. He chuckled. Come on, Tasha. You're used to luxury. You think I don't notice? The perfume, the jewelry, the way you dress? Women like you don't date guys unless they see potential. He winked, as if that made the insult cute. But hey, you picked a good one. My startup is taking off soon. You'll see. Big things. I sipped my champagne, letting the fizz settle under my tongue. He thought he was offering foresight. He thought I needed him to succeed so I'd stay. He thought he was the prize. He didn't know he'd sat across from the silent architect of more fortunes than he could comprehend. But not tonight. Tonight, he needed to believe every delusion he came in with. Men like Marcus reveal themselves best when they believe they're the smartest one at the table. As he continued talking about his projected revenue, about the investors he hoped to impress, about the tech conference he couldn't afford but pretended he could, I let his words float around me like smoke. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was simply done. Quietly, elegantly, and without fanfare. Before the night ended, he leaned forward and kissed my hand. You're lucky to be with a man like me. Someday you'll appreciate it. I smiled again. Someday he would. Have you ever been judged by someone who didn't know your truth? Tell me where you're watching from. No reveal. No clues yet. Only normal life, warmth, subtle luxury atmosphere. The first time I met Aaron, he was standing outside a small holiday pop-up market, clutching a paper cup of peppermint coffee like it was keeping him alive. Snowflakes clung to his eyelashes, and he smiled at me like I was some miracle dripping out of the winter sky. Back then, I thought that meant something. He said he loved how simple I was. I didn't realize then that simple was already the first knife. But tonight in memory, I returned to that early December afternoon, a moment so soft it almost feels borrowed. The street lamps glowed gold against the falling snow, children ran past with mittens too big for their hands, and everything smelled of cinnamon and cold air. He wrapped his scarf around my shoulders when the wind shifted, and I remember thinking, maybe this is what safety feels like. I should have known better. But love makes you generous with warnings. At home, my life looked ordinary to him, intentionally so. My townhouse was warm, minimal, nothing showy. A velvet throw over the couch, soft piano music drifting from the hallway speakers, a faint scent of white amber lingering in the air. Not luxury, not wealth. Just peace. That's all I wanted to show him then. He made himself comfortable quickly. Some men do when they assume you have nothing to protect. He would talk about his ideas at length. Apps, platforms, next-gen innovation, all of it floating somewhere above reality. I listened patiently, nodding, asking questions. I never told him that before my own company took off, I'd spent 10 years studying pitches just like his, learning the difference between dreams and business models. Sometimes he'd laugh when I made a suggestion. "You're cute," he'd say. "I forget you don't come from this world." That sentence, even then, stung a little. But I swallowed it, told myself I was being sensitive. Our evenings were quiet. He liked coming over because my place felt peaceful, as he put it, not knowing that the peace cost millions in investments, lawsuits, late nights, and decisions that could shape or break entire companies. He only saw the soft lighting, not the steel underneath. I didn't mind. Not yet. Not then. I genuinely liked him, his ambition, his childlike excitement. When he talked about his startup idea, his eyes lit up. He wasn't cruel at first, just insecure. Insecurity has a way of dressing itself as arrogance when people get too close to someone they think they don't deserve. On weekends, we'd walk through the holiday district. Gold lights draped across balconies, shops playing the same 3 Christmas songs on loop, couples laughing with cups of hot cider. He'd squeeze my hand and talk about someday, about what he'd do when he finally made his first real million. I never said that I'd already passed that milestone long ago. Some truths aren't meant to be thrown into cold air. Still, the love was real, at least on my side. Real enough that I let him see me softer than most people do. Real enough that I believed he'd see my silence as kindness, not emptiness. But December has a way of revealing people. Holiday lights cast honest shadows. It was during a simple dinner, candles lit, jazz humming softly, that his tone changed. One comment slipped, then another. Then the first fracture appeared. He didn't know it yet, but that night would lead us straight into the humiliation he thought I'd quietly accept. He had no idea who he was talking to. Not yet. It happened 3 days before Christmas, the kind of night designed for romance, not ruin. Aaron invited me to a small holiday dinner with his friends. "Just casual," he said, brushing a kiss across my cheek. "They're dying to meet you." His words felt sweet. His intentions were something else entirely. The restaurant was one of those places where everything glowed. Amber sconces, polished marble floors, candles flickering inside crystal cylinders. Piano music drifted through the room, soft enough to feel like it was brushing against the back of your neck. I wore a simple black dress, silk understated, the kind of quiet luxury people mistake for plainness if they don't know what they're looking at. My hair framed my face beautifully, and a thin gold bracelet glimmered under the candlelight, delicate, intentional. Aaron noticed none of it. His friends were already tipsy when we arrived. The moment I sat down, I could feel the air shift. Quick glances, raised brows, that strange smile people give when they've already decided who you are. "So," one of the women asked, swirling her wine, "what do you do, Tasha?" "I work." "A little of everything," Aaron cut in, laughing. "She's kind of figuring things out." The table laughed, loudly, carelessly. My fingers tightened around my glass, but I kept my expression smooth. Another man leaned in. "Bro, she's gorgeous. But you gotta be careful. These holiday relationships turn expensive real fast." Aaron smirked. "She's not expensive," he said. "Trust me." The laughter hit harder this time. The candles dimmed, or maybe the humiliation was just pulling shadows closer. My ears rang in the soft hush of embarrassment. Piano keys pressed through the air, slow, aching, as if the universe itself was wincing. I tried to breathe. Tried to anchor myself in the softness of my bracelet, the silk beneath my palms, the snow drifting outside the window. But then came the sentence that split the night in half. "She's sweet," Aaron said, shrugging, "but let's be real, she's not exactly wife material. More like, he made a vague hand gesture. Holiday fun." My skin went cold. So cold it felt like even the snow outside was ashamed. And honestly, he continued, glancing at me like I wasn't even there, I'm tired of girls who see a good man and immediately want a piece of his success. Gold diggers everywhere these days. His friends hauled. My pulse pounded in my ears. Gold digger. Gold digger. Gold digger. A word that would make sense only to someone who couldn't imagine a woman having her own foundation, her own investments, her own empire built brick by brick in silence. He didn't know he'd just insulted the investor who could have funded or destroyed his entire future. But the worst part? He still wasn't done. One of the women leaned over, faux sympathy dripping. Don't feel bad, honey. Men like Aaron need women who can match their level. You know, mentally, financially. I smiled, a small, elegant, terrifying smile. I understand, I said softly. And in that moment, I knew they mistook grace for weakness. Aaron clinked his glass, still grinning at his audience, oblivious to the storm gathering in the quiet curve of my jaw. Exactly, he said. She's pretty, but she's not built for my world. He didn't realize. I founded half of it. The ride home was quiet. Not the peaceful kind, the hollow kind. The kind where streetlights pass like slow-moving ghosts against the car window, each one pulling at a different part of your chest. Aaron didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He kept talking about the crazy good vibe at dinner, animated, satisfied, replaying moments where his friends laughed a little too loudly at my expense. You took it well, he said, patting my knee like I was a child. Some girls would have gotten emotional. Emotional. As if humiliation was a personality flaw. I kept my face turned toward the window, watching snow gather on the edges of the glass. Every flake felt like a reminder. Stay quiet. Let the moment breathe. Let the truth bloom later, not now. Inside my coat pocket, my phone buzzed. One short vibration. I knew the pattern by heart. But I didn't pull it out. Not yet. When we reached his apartment, he tossed his keys onto the marble console. Babe, I'm gonna shower, he said, already halfway down the hall. Long night, right? Long. He had no idea. I walked into his living room. Dim lighting, the soft scent of cedarwood candles, the faint reflection of city lights spilling across the glass coffee table. Luxury wrapped the room, but not because of him. He was renting success he thought he owned. I sat down on the velvet sofa, let the silence settle, let my lungs stop shaking. Then I finally checked my phone. One new message from Elise, board secretary. Your 8 a.m. investor briefing confirmed. All materials prepared. Final decision on the Creighton proposal awaiting your signature. Creighton. Aaron's last name. A small, almost invisible clue. But we'd keep it quiet. I deleted the message. His shower water echoed down the hallway. A steady, unbothered rhythm, as if he were trying to wash off the night's arrogance. I leaned back, letting the velvet cradle me, letting the weight of the evening sink into the folds of my dress. My bracelet, thin gold, understated, glimmered as I lifted my hand. It felt sharper now, the way jewelry feels when you suddenly remember its true price. My mind replayed every word. You're not wife material. You won't understand business. She's not expensive. Gold digger. Each one landed differently now, falling into place like puzzle pieces forming a picture of a man who didn't know anything about the world he was climbing into. He came back from the shower with a towel around his waist, hair damp, skin smug. You okay? He asked casually, rubbing lotion onto his arms. I nodded once. Silence is a language all its own. He grinned, leaning down to kiss my forehead. Good? Don't overthink stuff. You know how you get. How I get. I stood up slowly. In that movement alone, the slow slide of silk against velvet, the whisper of my heels touching marble, something shifted. Not for him. For me. I should go, I said softly. He blinked. No. It's freezing. I know. He tried to read my face, but he'd never learned how. He could read menus, football stats, stock gossip, but not women, not pain, not quiet storms. You good? He repeated, almost annoyed now. I smiled, a small, serene curve of my lips. Completely. At the door, I paused long enough for him to think I might turn back. Instead, I slipped my phone into my bag, wrapped my coat around me, and walked into the cold midnight air. The city felt different tonight. Sharper, cleaner, brighter, as if it were waiting. The boardroom that morning felt colder than usual, not from temperature, but from tension you could taste. The glass walls were spotless, catching morning sun in long, gold reflections. A bowl of white orchids sat in the center of the conference table, their petals glowing like soft porcelain. Everything looked delicate, except me. I arrived early, silent, polished, wearing a deep emerald blouse made of silk that whispered with every step, the kind of fabric that only reveals its worth under the right lighting. No one noticed. They never did. He walked in late. Of course he did. Ethan pushed the door with his shoulder, holding 2 coffees, neither for me, and smirked when he saw I'd taken a seat near the head of the table. "Someone's ambitious today," he said, pulling out a chair across from mine. "Don't worry, Tasha. You'll get your moment. Just not here." He thought he was being clever. He didn't realize the chair I chose wasn't ambition. It was alignment, directly opposite the seat that would soon belong to the new investor. I offered him a faint smile, the kind that reveals nothing. He took it as agreement. The others filed in, executives in sharp blues, office chatter humming like background static. They barely glanced at me except to ask if I could help organize the packets and make sure everyone got a pen. I passed out the packets. I placed the pens. And none of them noticed that the binder clips had the logo of my firm on them. Discreet. Minimalist. Quiet luxury. A clue so gentle most people would never see it. They didn't. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, rehearsed confidence draped over him like a coat. "I'm telling you," he said to the room, "our new investor is going to love the numbers. They know real potential when they see it." My pulse stayed steady. He had no idea he was talking about me. While they reviewed the presentation, I took out a slim leather notebook, black, soft, and embossed with a gold monogram no one recognized. Another clue. Another secret kept in plain sight. Ethan didn't even glance at it. He kept talking, louder each minute, like he needed to impress the room before whoever was walking in next could overshadow him. He bragged about projections I'd already approved. He boasted about decisions I'd quietly corrected. He claimed credit for strategies my anonymous investment advisor had sent, strategies that were mine. Around 10 minutes in, he turned to me. "You look a little tense," he said with a smirk. "Sure you're ready for this level of meeting?" I inhaled slowly. The scent of the orchids, soft, floral, expensive, calmed my chest. "I'm perfectly ready," I said. "Good," he replied, as if granting me permission. Then it happened. The door opened. Footsteps approached, slow, firm, familiar. Not mine. My partner, the managing director of the fund that fronted the investment, entered the room. He wore a dark suit with a pocket square that matched the emerald of my blouse, another intentional detail. Another clue. He placed his folder on the table, greeted the board with a warm, polished smile, then looked directly at me. "Good morning, Tasha," he said with subtle respect. "I have the updated files you requested." Ethan's brows pulled together. The others glanced around. "You two know each other?" someone asked. My partner nodded. "Quite well." A ripple of quiet confusion moved across the room. Ethan shifted in his chair. "And no one told me she was involved with the investor team." No one had to. I tapped my pen gently against my notebook, another whisper of a clue. Another sign none of them were ready to read. The meeting hadn't even begun, and their certainty was already cracking. The meeting resumed, but the air had changed. It was subtle, like when a storm is still miles away but you can suddenly taste metal in the wind. Ethan kept glancing between me and the managing director, his jaw tightening each time our eyes met. He didn't understand the dynamic, only that something was off, something he couldn't control. My partner opened his folder, laying out documents in smooth, disciplined motions. A quiet luxury move, slow, intentional, commanding attention without demanding it. Everyone leaned in. Except me. I already knew every number on those pages. "Before we begin," my partner said, I'd like to thank Ms. Williams for her early insights on this proposal. Her notes were essential. Heads turned. Some sharply, some cautiously. No one hid their confusion now. Ethan forced a laugh. Her notes? Really? She's very new to the team. My partner blinked slowly, almost pitying him. New, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Interesting. He said nothing else. But silence can be sharper than language. Ethan shifted again, tugging at his collar. My partner passed copies of the revised projection sheets across the table. They were printed on heavy, cream-textured paper, the kind used only for premium investor briefings. Another clue. Another gentle whisper of status. Notice the margin adjustments, my partner continued. These were flagged early by Tasha. Someone murmured. She caught those. I didn't react. I sipped water from a crystal glass that chimed softly when I set it down. The sound traveled farther than any words I could have said. Ethan jumped in quickly. Well, sure. She has potential. But she doesn't. My partner raised a hand. Not rudely. Just firmly enough to silence him. Please, he said. Let's stay focused. That was the first warning. The second came moments later. One of the senior executives, a man who hadn't looked me in the eye once all year, cleared his throat and asked, Ms. Williams, do you have any recommendations for the next quarter? The room stilled. Ethan actually blinked in disbelief. Why would she? Because, the executive cut in, the investor's representative clearly values her perspective. My pulse stayed steady, but something warm moved behind my ribs, not pride, but inevitability. The room was starting to see me. Not fully, but enough. I adjusted the cuff of my blouse, letting the emerald silk catch the light. Consider shifting your customer acquisition expenses toward long-term retention strategies, I said. You're overspending early and bleeding margin later. A few people nodded. Someone whispered, she's right. My partner smiled. Exactly. That's the adjustment we implemented. Ethan stared at the papers, confused. He didn't understand how I knew numbers he hadn't seen yet. Another clue. Another crack. He leaned toward me, voice low and sharp. Where did you get those figures? I met his gaze calm. Same place you did. The lie was quiet. Elegant. Necessary. My partner looked between us, measuring something that only seasoned investors recognize, a mix of ego and panic. That brings us, he said smoothly, to the equity discussion. The room straightened. Even the orchids seemed to pause. For the first time all morning, Ethan lost his confident posture. What equity discussion? He asked. My partner folded his hands. The one our lead investor will finalize when she arrives. Silence. Lead investor. Not investor representative. Not executive contact. Lead. A title dropped like soft gold on a marble floor, quiet but impossible to ignore. A few people turned to stare at me openly, their expressions shifting in real time. Suspicion. Recognition. Fear. Ethan swallowed hard. She? Who is she? My partner's eyes flicked briefly toward me. Another clue. The biggest one yet. And still not the reveal. Don't worry, he said softly. You'll meet her very soon. The room exhaled, and no one dared to speak again. The door opened before anyone was ready for it. At first, no one turned. They were too wrapped in numbers, fear, and the thick tension that coated the room like velvet dust. But then the room shifted, the kind of shift that happens when someone important enters. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Echoing lightly across the marble floor outside the conference room, each step landing like a soft bell. Ethan was the first to look. He straightened in his chair, smoothing his shirt, trying to wear confidence like it wasn't slipping off him. Then the door opened wider, and the executive assistant stepped in. Everyone, she said, voice respectful, our lead investor has arrived. Every spine in the room lifted. Chairs creaked. Someone fixed their tie. Ethan turned fully toward the door, expecting a man older, gray at the temples, expensive suit. Instead, I stepped through. The light from the hallway followed me, soft gold reflecting off the pearl studs I wore, catching the sheen of the emerald silk blouse beneath my tailored winter coat. The coat trailed slightly behind me, brushing the floor like a whisper of velvet shadow. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I simply walked. And the room fell silent. Dead silent. One executive actually stood, not out of courtesy, but shock. Another dropped his pen. It hit the glass table with a sound that felt too loud in the stillness. Ethan's eyes widened, the confusion blooming into disbelief. A sound left his mouth, not quite a word, more like a breath collapsing. "No," he whispered. I slid into the empty chair at the head of the table, the chair no one touched all morning. I placed my leather portfolio on the polished glass, its soft thud final, like the period at the end of a truth. My partner stepped aside slightly, now positioned to my right instead of leading. A silent gesture of hierarchy. He nodded once. "Everyone," he said. "This is Ms. Tasha Williams, founder of the Meridian Fund, and the lead investor in today's deal." The words moved across the room like smoke, slow, creeping, inescapable. Ethan's face strained. He looked at me the way a person looks at a stranger who suddenly becomes a mirror. Everything he'd said, every joke he'd made, every careless dismissal. He saw it all at once. "Tasha," he breathed, voice cracking. You're your Meridian?" I met his eyes. Calm. Still. Unmoved. "Good morning, Ethan." Confusion flickered. Then the horror settled. The realization of all those nights he mocked my work, called my ideas cute, told me I didn't understand startups. The irony bruised him. You could see it. One executive cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. "Ms. Williams, will you be leading the equity negotiation?" "Yes," I said softly. "I will." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The quiet carried weight. I placed one document on the table, the original pitch from months ago. His pitch. The one he bragged about. The one I funded anonymously. He stared at the signature page. At my initials. At the date. He choked on his breath. You funded us from the beginning?" "Yes." "And you never told me? You never asked." The silence that hit afterward wasn't harsh. It was elegant. Clean. The kind of silence that comes when truth settles exactly where it belongs. My partner folded his hands. "With Ms. Williams here, we can finalize our conversation about leadership." Ethan blinked. "Leadership?" "Yes." I leaned back slightly, light glinting off the crystal water glass beside me. For this next phase, the investor wants someone who understands respect, humility, and long-term vision. His mouth parted. "Tasha, please." I lifted one hand gently, not dismissing him, just guiding him into silence. "You said I'd never understand business," I said. "But I understand more than you think." The executives nodded slowly. One murmured, "Incredible." Another whispered, "I didn't see it coming." Neither did he. And that was the point. The room exhaled as the truth completed its slow, elegant unfurling. Power revealed quietly hits louder than any shout. The negotiation didn't last long. Once the shock settled, the board shifted into a quiet kind of order, the kind that happens when everyone realizes the true center of gravity in the room. Conversations softened. Postures straightened. Even the air felt different, thicker with respect they hadn't shown me before. Ethan sat small in his chair. It wasn't the posture of a CEO. It was the posture of a man watching a future he thought he deserved slip through fingers that never knew how to hold gently. Across the glass table, documents were passed, pens slid, signatures drawn with clean strokes. Crystal glasses clinked softly, a muted toast to a partnership built on more than ego. My partner spoke, voice smooth as polished mahogany. "Ms. Williams, your terms are approved. We'll proceed with the leadership restructure." Restructure. The word hung in the air, soft but sharp. Ethan swallowed. His eyes darted to me. "Please," he whispered. "Can we talk privately?" I studied him for a moment. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Months ago, he would have laughed at the idea of asking me for anything. Now he couldn't even disguise the tremble in his voice. "Of course," I said. His shoulders lifted slightly, relief flickering. But the board stood as I rose, each executive stepping aside respectfully. He watched that. He watched the way others moved for me, something he had never done. Outside the conference room, the hallway was quiet, washed in amber light from the pendant lamps above. My heels tapped against the marble, each step calm, intentional. He followed. Tasha. My name fell out of him like a confession. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say that you owned all this? I turned to face him fully. Would it have changed how you treated me? His mouth opened, closed. He didn't have an answer, only excuses reaching for breath. I was stressed, he murmured. I was under pressure. The deal. This isn't about the deal, I said, voice low but steady. It's about the way you value people. The way you valued me. He stared at the marble floor as if the truth was carved there. I continued, softer. You called me clueless. You laughed when I shared ideas. You told your friends I didn't get the world you lived in. His jaw tightened, shame reddening his face. And yet, I said, that world was one I built long before you walked into it. He flinched, not from cruelty, but from the clean, blunt weight of reality finally catching him. Tasha, I'm sorry. I nodded gently. I know you are. His eyes lifted, hopeful. But sorry doesn't rebuild what you broke. A long silence stretched between us, warm and final like the last note of a piano piece. He exhaled shakily. What happens now? I stepped aside, gesturing toward the conference room. The board will let you know. It's their decision. Not mine. He blinked slowly. You're letting them decide my fate? Ethan, I said, I already made my decision. Months ago, when I chose to invest in the idea, not the ego. The truth settled in him, heavy but calm. A lesson, not a punishment. I watched him breathe through it, shoulders falling, pride collapsing into something quieter. Maybe even growth. Goodbye, Ethan. His throat tightened at the softness in the farewell. The softness hurt more than any sharpness would have. I walked back toward the boardroom. The door opened before I reached it, as if sensing whose steps approached. Inside, the executives stood again, not demanded, just natural. Respect isn't asked for. It's recognized. As I took my seat, the city skyline glittered behind me, lights reflecting on the glass wall in soft gold tones. My life was quiet luxury, steady power, not loud, not flaunted, just true, just mine. And somewhere behind that glass door, a man finally learned that underestimating a woman isn't a harmless mistake. It's an education. If you've ever been underestimated or dismissed, tell me what you wish they had seen.